Yo, what's up, Super Fiends? It's Io the Bow, and today we have a tier list. And this tier list is brought to you by our first provisionals this weekend. For those of you who don't know, a provisional is somewhat like a regional type event. It is going to be webcam. It is sold out at 256 players. And if you are one of those lucky players that got into the tournament, this video is for you. This is an opinion-based video, and it is a tier list of what I think the meta looks like and how I feel about every single character. So we are going to go through every single character, but I do want to go through the criteria that I've gone through to make this tier list. So first and foremost, I have different, as you can see on the screen, criteria that I've laid out on why I placed those characters in those tiers, and then we're going to be going through those. And then also I use data from a website that I created that has all of the posted online tournament deck lists. I've also got a spreadsheet that you can look through, and you can also categorize those characters so you can look for specific characters that you would like to see. In addition, all of that information is going to be in the description below, so always be sure to check that in every single video. And without further ado, we're going to go with the S tiers. So S tier, I feel like, are characters that are strong advantage and feels like they're cheating. That's essentially what S tier to me feels like. And Kirishima, we'll start with him. Why is Kirishima an S? So Kirishima is an S tier character because he does offense and defense very well. Not many characters can do this, and I've come to find out when you're playing Kirishima, you often get to dump out your hand and have no type of punishment. In addition, you're able to recycle cards, which a lot of characters cannot do, and I think that's a kind of a broken mechanic. So for us, that is why Kirishima is an S tier. And then next up is Eraserhead. Eraserhead, I feel like, absolutely has to be an S tier. I don't know if a lot of people are playing them or showing too much success with Eraserhead, but absolutely, just by the card alone, I feel like has to be an S tier. And why does it have to be an S tier? And for me, it is because he has some ridiculous speed manipulation. Every single attack, whether it's yours or your opponent's, is going to get +2 or -2 speed, and then you get to pick up a mid block that has a +1 block modifier. That is some crazy defense. Not only that, but you also get to draw 2 cards. So I feel like Eraserhead is pretty busted by that alone. Next up, we have Kamui Woods. Kamui Woods is a really good defensive character, and opposite of Eraserhead, Kamui Woods deals with damage, and tournament data shows that Kamui Woods is very consistent, has a lot of play data, and also is just something that players bring to tournaments. So I have not played the character myself. I played against it. It has good damage reduction. It has a crazy way to pay for blocking. So blocking with this character is fairly easy. It's kind of like having -1 speed to all of your opponent's attacks in a way, but not really. You're using the character card to pay for the cost. This is what I'm trying to say. Next up, we have Kyoka Jiro. Now, Jiro is pretty busted in the sense that you can have damage and speed for every one of your attacks as long as they're a charge or weapon or both. It depends what it is, and then you'll get that type of bonus. But also, Jiro can look at the top 2 cards of both players' deck. This allows you to stack your deck to go be consistent on what your next check is going to be, and this also could potentially, put a wrench into your opponent's game plan by giving them a bad check. So Jiro, even though in webcam play she is nerfed because all cards have to be revealed instead of looked at because of the nature of webcam, Jiro has been seeing a lot of top consistent undefeateds. Actually, I wouldn't say undefeated, except for Tamarin Cardwell. Tamarin Cardwell did side into Jiro, so I call it a Jiro deck. I don't know. But yeah, Jiro has been seeing consistent tops, and players are showing that Jiro is something to be feared for because of how many consistent toppings there are. Also, it's a really good matchup against Kirishima because of the flash attacks. Kirishima cannot pick up blocks during flash attacks. Now you have Ochako 2 in S tier. And at first, I wasn't too sure about this card, but it is pretty busted, and there's a few attacks that I've noticed that can be very nutty with Ochako 2. Some of it is in a build of my own, and I haven't seen anyone play them yet, or at least in the combination that I have them in. So look forward to that video. But yes, Ochako 2, in my opinion, getting that +2 speed, getting to hack your check, having a bunch of life, and being able to put out some serious damage early game. The early game is just incredible. I kind of look at her as a better Nomu, except at least Nomu can reduce damage from different characters to 6. So Nomu has better defensive game plan, but Ochako I feel like has a stronger offense play. Now, next up we have is Froppy 2 Dot, Tsuyu Asui, another character from the DLC. And this character, I'd have to say, is really busted. There was a player that I played against that I forgot their name. I have it somewhere, but we're just going to get straight to this. So they played a character, Froppy 2 Dot, and all it had was a bunch of throws, you know, the tongue whips, and it had tape swing and grass swing tape toss, which are essentially both throws. And what's crazy is you can give damage to these attacks even though they are throws. So these things are chipping for at least 5 damage because they're going to be either 10 damage or they're going to be 9 damage. So half rounded up is always going to be 5. That's insane in Froppy, and she also has 29 health, which is a lot of health for a character. So that is why I believe she is an S tier, because it feels like cheating that you can do so much damage guaranteed, and then you also have all this life. So it just, I think more players need to play her, and then it'll reflect her S tier status. Next up, we're going to the A tier. An A tier is a consistent character, but doesn't have to work too hard and is what it is. And by is what it is, I just mean that the card is what you get and it does well. So first up, we have both All Mights. I'm just going to do both All Mights at the same time. And the reason why I feel like these are both A tier characters is because they have something to do with draw, so that helps them on defense, and then they have something to do with damage or speed. So they're very similar characters, except that the Gen Con All Might can scale the speed buff and the damage buff, and you also get to choose. But the thing for me is that All Might DLC has a weaker Kirishima matchup, just because Kirishima can play with no cards in hand, and you're not going to get a lot of damage or speed boosts. Now, All Might 2 Dot, which is the DLC All Might, can give upwards to +4 damage to an attack because of how he functions. If the previous attack was blocked, then you have a floating +2 damage going in. In addition, I just feel like this character can help a lot of aggro versions of All Might. So if you wanted to play like the fire build, for example, you could play Frigid Heat Wave. If you wanted to play the all build, you can mill into Night Watch, have Night Watch on the field, and then mill into some actions. I think that's very strong because you have an offensive character with one of the strongest defensive pieces, which is being able to cancel out your opponent's enhances. So I personally prefer the DLC All Might, but arguably I could settle for them being on the same level or plane, just because of how I think that they're very similar. Next up, we have Bakugo, and I feel like Bakugo is A tier just because of how crazy his attack lineup is. And also Bakugo has access to draw, has access to speed hate. I feel like on paper, Bakugo is really tight and has everything that you would want in a character. But I think players that play Bakugo can sometimes fall into the bad mental mindset of wanting to go in and putting too much risk or committing too much for reward that doesn't work out. Because Bakugo is 100% a character that's risk and reward. Because you're destroying your own foundations and you're giving +2 damage, you have to really ask yourself a lot, is destroying this foundation making sense at this time? Not only that, but I feel like characters or Bakugo shouldn't be playing cards like Encouragement, because while I guess it is really strong early game, mid to late game is what matters most, because that's how you can consistently win tournament games. Any character that tries to win early game, you know, maybe they can do it, but it's not always going to be consistent. So I feel like the stronger tournament players are actually going to be the players that can have a backup plan for mid to late game, which is why I feel like the Foundation Encouragement shouldn't be played in Bakugo. But continuing, I do think that Bakugo is strong. Like Blitz Rush Turbo, I think is the card name. That card is a scaling attack that can give it upwards to like plus 10 damage or more. And Bakugo has access to that. Bakugo has access to really tight attack lineups. Bakugo also has access to agitation, which allows them to draw. So I'm really just repeating what I'm saying. But yes, I feel like on paper, Bakugo has everything somebody would want to play in a character. Next up, we have Denki Kaminari in the A tier. And Denki, I feel like, deserves a spot here just because that there are a lot of different options to support his game plan, which is gaining a bunch of momentum and then dumping it all out on a Recipro Burst, actually it's not called Recipro, it's called Engine Rush or Blitz Rush. There's a lot of different attacks out there, and there's also a lot of tools for this deck. And the reason why I say this is because I've seen them. So for example, I would say Shock Treatment, and there's also Electric Jolt. Those are some really key cards I feel like Denki Kaminari players should be playing, because those take away the options from your opponent. The one thing that you do need that not a lot of players really think about is you do need full Cowlings just so you can tap down Nomu, because Nomu's pretty much like our worst matchup, just because Nomu can reduce damage to 6 with his character card. So in that case, yes, Denki is gimmicky, but is very effective, and it's going to blow up the opponents, taking them from like full health to 0 if played correctly. So Denki is a something to be feared, but it takes the right pilot and the right deck builder to make the deck in a way that it can be tournament consistent. Next up, we have Sero. And Sero, for me, the character and most of the kit, most of the card pool that Sero has access to, in my opinion, lacks damage. But there are ways to get a lot of damage, and I just want to see Hanta Sero players get access to it and then find damage in creative ways. It's there. You just have to look really hard and work hard for it. But that's the only thing that Sero is missing. And other than that, Sero is a very solid character card. Has access to a bunch of different things. The character card is strong. You get to change the zone of your attacks, which can oftentimes put your opponent in a really bad position. You're playing mind games and you're getting damage in that way. Also, there is the once per game ability, which allows you to look at your opponent's hand after you block, and then you get to discard one of their cards. Now, this ability is insanely good. It's not good against everybody, but for the majority of the field, this is really good, because what you can do with this is you can use this in two different ways. You can use it to where you are hacking your opponent's hand, so that way you can finish them like on your next turn, and then you can beat them down with attacks and making sure that they don't have this one defensive card in their hand. Like a Plus Ultra, for example, you can make them discard Plus Ultra, then they don't have Plus Ultra to block. Also, you can use this to take away their best card in their hand. So for like Bakugo, for example, if there was like a Blast Rush Turbo and there was only one of them, you can make them discard it. Denki, make them discard Recipro Burst. All these different characters, you can make them discard cards. That's why Sero is good. Next up, we have Mineta in A tier, and I feel like I'm not sure. I want to see more players playing Mineta, and I don't want Mineta to have the stigmatism that he's a bad character, because he is absolutely not. I got to play a throw build with Mineta, and I think that Mineta is an A tier character card. People just have to build him correctly. And the reason why I say he's so good is because his ability that allows you to cut for one and then your opponent has to commit a foundation, I feel like that is a better breaker one, because no matter what, you're making your opponent having to commit a card, and this is after every response. So that being said, it does cost 1 life because of how powerful it is, but that type of ability can make your opponent not go all the way in, and it buys you more time as Mineta to finish off your opponent. So that's why I think a throw build is really good with Mineta, because you're able to chip damage over time, but also have a really good defense game. So next up we have Nomu. Nomu, I feel like, is the best new player character card, and the reason why is because Nomu gives you our opponent a ticking time clock, and it's really hard for players to know how to defend and block, because the thing about blocking and being defensive is you have to slow yourself down, and I don't think that a lot of people are used to that, playing, you know, this type of card game where it really feels like you're in the pilot seat and you are, you know, you're driving, right? And you're just kind of coasting, you want to win the race and all that. But sometimes, you know, in this type of game, in this type of environment, you got to pump the brakes to win the race. You know, everybody has to reach like a gas stop. But for Nomu takes advantage of that. And the way that Nomu takes advantage of that is because players don't know how to block, so they're oftentimes going to be taking a lot of damage from Nomu. And I think that now that players are more familiar with the card pool, I think players that build today's Nomu, they found a way to make him more consistent, make him draw more attack cards often, so that way Nomu can't miss a kill shot. Really solid character card. Next up we have Suyu Asui. This is the MHA base set 1 Froppy, and this character card is just very aggressive and functions similarly to Bakugo, except, you know, instead of having damage, you have speed and you can clear your card pool. So this character is very offensive, and I think with the addition of Tongue Whip, this makes her a lot stronger, because I was having trouble finding like what are the best attacks, but I think Tongue Whip with her right now would be really strong, and she's just a very solid 7-hander. So I think that that's why she is in A tier, because what she does helps you progress the game immensely, and it also makes the game easier. So next up we have the B tier, and the B tier, I put this as works harder to be consistent. So what I mean by that is these characters are not inherently consistent. You have to build the deck to make them consistent. So the character card is not really doing all the work or pulling all the weight. The support has to reflect on making the character more competitive. So first up we have base set 1 All Might. This is the set 1 that you pull from the pack, and with this All Might, my thing is I like to compare it to the other 3 All Mights, and the thing about the other 3 All Mights is they have consistent damage that they can just kind of pump for free and pump early game. This All Might is a little bit different. You give powerful to your attacks, but you're not actually giving any type of speed or damage early game. What's really good about this character though is that this character probably has the most draw early game, because you're being able to draw 3 cards every single turn, but your max hand size goes down by 1. So you're seeing more cards than pretty much like the whole field. You get to draw 8 cards on your first turn if you went second, and that gives you more options to see, you know, what can you do. So I think there just needs to be more cards or more, you know, gimmicks thrown away to this character card to get better. But as of right now, it's really just a character that draws more cards, and I feel like Kirishima already has the ability to manipulate card advantage. So for me, I don't see a point in playing All Might 1 at the moment, even though it is a really good character. So now we have All Might 4, which is the box topper for set 1. Shane Duckworth actually built a really neat deck. I haven't gotten to try it or play against it, but I've heard great things and I can kind of see it on paper. So this character is just very aggressive. You want to play different attacks and also discard 6 checks character cards, so that way you can give +3 damage. I think the other ability where you can gain abilities doesn't really matter a whole lot. You know, normally you don't use it for that. It's really just the filter, the 6 checks, and then pushing out damage. So for that reason, I think this character is okay. I think you have to build the deck and you have to work hard, and it's thrown up to RNG. You know, you're playing a alternative playstyle. It's not really traditional. I'm not saying it's bad, but that's just how I view it. So now we have Izuku Midoriya, aka Deku. And the thing about this character is I love the speed hate, because it's very thematic. You have to be the Deku mind, you know, note taker, and predict what your opponent's going to play for their next attack. So players that are piloting Deku, you know, you are already put in the Deku seat by having to predict what your opponents are playing based on observation. Like during the game, you can look at your opponent's discard pile and you can be like, oh, this is attacks that they're playing in their deck, and this is the sequence that they play them in. So if they play this low attack, there's a high chance that their attack is going to be mid, because they've been doing that for the last 2 turns. So then you can call mid and then give it -3 speed. And the reason why Deku is in B tier and Bakugo is in A tier is because Deku can put +10 damage, but what I've come to find out is your opponent is going to generally take all the damage that they can, and they're going to wait to make sure that they don't take that +10 damage or that all-in damage or attack, because they don't want to die. And often by my opponents doing this, I found myself in a lot of trouble and being too slow and not getting enough damage through, because my opponents would always have defense saved up for the last attack. And if you fail the last attack, you know, you're pretty much opening yourself up for punishment at that point, because you're discarding your whole hand. So for that reason, I think Deku's a B tier character, because Deku has to work really hard to get the finishing kill shot, whereas Bakugo can discard 1 momentum and give +10 damage to his attack. So they work in different ways. It's very thematic, but I feel like Bakugo's just plays better in tournament. Next up, we have Tokiyami, Fumikage Tokiyami, the crow guy. And this character is really tight. You get to mill for an action, pick one up. That makes him essentially an 8-hander. And then you also get to +1/-1 damage. And the thing about this character and why I have it in B tier is that the support is not all that great, because on every single symbol that you try to play Tokiyami on, it feels like you're missing something in that symbol, whether it's like speed hate, whether it's damage, and the attack lineup feels a little bit clunky, but not too much, because you want to have an attack lineup that kind of just curves and makes sense. But a lot of the times, while you could play Tokiyami's attacks, I just find better use in other characters' attacks. But the mainstay in Tokiyami decks has to be Dark Shadow Ruins, which absolutely is great in Tokiyami. And I feel like when you're playing defensive with Tokiyami, you have to be pretty big brain, because your defensive kit is different from everyone else's. So that being said, I think Tokiyami has to be in B tier. Next up, we have Mina Ashido, aka Pinky, and this character card is pretty much alright. I try to find like a good reason to like it, or like put it into A, but I really have it in B tier. But I think that's mostly because of my lack of experience with the character card and me not having to find a way to break the character yet. But what she does is very solid. You're essentially being able to make yourself into a selective 7-hander. Like on turn 1, if you're second, you can use her ability to build an extra foundation that you normally wouldn't have. You can also use her ability to cheat out some attacks when it's just really random. So that allows you to cheat out attacks. And next up, we have Momo Yayorozu. And this character, I put her in B tier, because while she has a strong kit, while she has strong tools, and you know, Staff Strike, it has to be respected. The thing about the character card is I feel like you're having to work harder to you know, get the pieces, the chess pieces onto the table, whereas I think you're taking one extra step to get those chess pieces, whereas everyone else, you know, they make a move and they immediately get their chess pieces. So that's how I feel about Momo. I'm not saying she's bad, but I feel like she works harder than other characters. Next up, we have Ochako 1 Dot. And Ochako 1 Dot, honestly, I probably should have put this in an A tier, because you are able to make 2 attacks into 5 attacks. And she did just win the tournament. You know what? I'm gonna change that. Give me a sec. Ochako I feel like deserves to be in an A tier at least. Why I had her in B tier, I don't know. But the reason why I have this character in A tier is because she has some crazy ways to make attacks, kind of like Froppy, and maybe better than Froppy, because when you're making extra attacks and you're putting out some really good offensive game against your opponent, that's just going to be strong. And I feel like that's a good way to say how Tamarin Cardwell was doing so well. You know, besides him being a solid player, having a lot of experience, I feel like there's some merit into the character card as well on why it did so well. And I think it has to be with the offensive game plan. You know, just being able to recycle attacks, and I believe she has something to do with speed. I think that's just very powerful, and good offense can win you games. So next up we have Mashiro Ojiro, which is the Plus Ultra character card, or one of them. And this character card has some really good on paper kit, which is a flat +3 damage, and then also making your opponent having to flip cards. So you can +3 damage to all of your attacks. And there's also once per game where you can add speed equal to the amount of face down foundations from your opponent, and it cannot be reduced, it cannot be canceled. So you're able to pretty much put your opponent in checkmate, which is a really cool thing I think you can do with Ojiro. But I haven't really seen a lot of positive tournament data with this character, and I think I know the reason why. I think the reason why is because the character card, I feel like you have to do more than just have damage and also just speed. I think you also have to make the character be able to draw cards, have a good defensive game plan, and just overall flow very well. Because early game, if you're Ojiro and you're just giving +3 damage to every single attack, that +3 damage doesn't matter if your opponent's just going to block it. So at that point, it feels like you're running into a wall sometimes. And, you know, maybe me saying that feels very familiar to Ojiro players. But when I play Kirishima, yeah, I block a lot of Ojiro attacks. Next up, we have Shoto Todoroki, and I put him in B tier, even though I'm a big fan of Todoroki's ability to cancel non-character enhances every turn, at least once. The thing about this character is I feel like there's not enough. There is enough, actually. There is enough, but I feel like there could be more cards that can be accessed by Shoto. And once we get those cards, Shoto will be a lot stronger. Probably put him in A or S tier, depending on how the meta looks. But as of right now, I think just only having one set holds him back, even though it's a very solid character card, and also got second place at the PPG 1K. But yes, very solid character. I just put him in B because I feel like the card pool is not in favor right now. So we have next Tomura Shigaraki. This is a B tier character, and the thing that puts him into B tier for me is I look at him and Nomu the same way. They're both characters that once you have the attack, but with Shigaraki is a little bit different because you can only do it on one attack, but Nomu can do it on multiple attacks. So it's just weird, but they generally make their attacks into like 10 damage is what they're doing effectively on paper. And with Shigaraki, you can only really do it once per turn. So I think that makes him more of a poke and defense character, which I don't know how strong that is. But I think if there were more cards in the card pool that help Shigaraki put more offensive game plan on like turn 1 and turn 2 when they're attacking, that would make the most sense, because then that's where that +5 damage comes into play, where it's like really important. But as of right now, I feel like Shigaraki gets outpaced by everyone, and if Shigaraki wants to catch up with them, the pilot has to be good and the deck has to be good. So next up we have our C tiers, which is when you have one trick and the trick is not good enough. I think that's a really great way to define characters. So the first one is Mezzo Shoji, and I've been hearing some talk like, oh, this character's not, this character's such and such. And the thing about Shoji is, I love the ability where you get to pick up another card and essentially makes him a 7 hand size selectively, and you get the +2 damage and, you know, to this attack and to the next attack. It's cool. But I don't think that there is currently a cohesive build that makes it worth playing Shoji. And I've tried to figure out, you know, what different combination of attacks can we play in a deck, and how can we make the character broken besides just being able to pick up cards. I feel like being able to pick up one card a turn is not enough to reason to play the character. And, you know, I think tournament data supports that. We don't really see a whole lot of crazy Shoji builds right now. You know, players may love the character card, but I have to see something, you know, worthy or scary, threatening. Next up we have Tenya Ida 1-Dot. I think this is a C tier character card. Tenya Ida has really great access to different supports, and I would say almost every symbol. I think the fire is the weakest symbol, but I have found ways to make fire a competitive symbol. But Order and Void, what they have access to is really strong. I don't know what it is, but I'm just not a fan of Tenya Ida's character card. Like, it's cool that you get speed every turn and you can -3 speed to help you block, but generally I find Tenya Ida lacking and, you know, not having a consistent game plan, because I think you do find yourself in the way of having to be draw reliant. I know that's like a very, you know, blanket idea, but hear me out. You know, I feel like you have to draw like the right setup to have Tenya Ida feel good all the time. Whereas like other characters, I feel like if you draw, you know, X or Y card or Z card, you know, you're always going to feel good. But with Ida, I feel like there's a certain game flow that you have to hit that's not always going to be consistent. And, you know, giving +3 speed, -3 speed is just not enough. But I am very excited for the set 3 Ida spoiler. You know, that already passed. I made a video on it, and I feel like that's going to take Tenya Ida to the next level. The character card is good, and I'm in love with Tenya Ida's support. As you've seen with all my decks, I play a lot of Tenya Ida attacks. So, last but not least, in C tier, we have Yuga. And Yuga is like, you know, flip, damage, and then you also get to play a card pretty much for lower difficulty. And I think the character card is tight, but it's very lackluster. You know, nobody's super threatened by Yuga and gonna die by Yuga. I think that there are competitive builds, but the tricks that Yuga has up his sleeve, I feel like are just not up to par with everyone else. And I think that's what keeps him in C tier. Now going into D tier, these I feel like don't have enough tools available. I don't think that there are cards out there that specifically support these characters to make them shine the best that they could be. So for example, Mount Lady, and I can go on, and I actually am going to go on with why I think she's not that good. Do you really want to go through your whole deck and every symbol doesn't have a way to mill cards off the top of your deck, so that way you can see character cards in your discard pile, and then when you pick up a character card, you are essentially just giving yourself a way to give +2 damage for discarding a momentum. Like, discarding 1 momentum early game for +2 damage is really weak. Discarding 1 momentum for +4 damage, like early to mid game, I think is weak. I feel like you have access to cards and attacks that already give that damage. I don't understand why your character has to scale to a point where it's like +8 damage for 1 momentum. I don't think that's strong. And you also have to manipulate your deck in a way where it's consistent, it's fast enough to get that bonus damage, and the other abilities on the character card are just not very strong offensively or defensively. It feels like you're dirtling and the reward that you're getting is very minimal. So that's how I feel about Mount Lady. Even though I love, Mount Lady in the MHA universe, the character card I feel has very low reward for playing it currently, until we see more support. Next up, we have Tenya Ida from the DLC. This is Ida 2. And this character missed the marks for me because I feel like the first set was better. You're able to interact with your opponent more, have a better impact on the game, and the conditions are a lot easier to fulfill, whereas the conditions on 2. is very poor because there's not a lot of different attacks out there that you're able to, use the +2 damage consistently. And then even the speed is just, worse than set 1's. And the 7-hand size and the vitality on him, I just don't think it's a character worth playing at the moment until we see some more support that's specific to how this character is themed and designed. So that's how I feel about every single character. Now I'm going to briefly show you this Excel sheet that I made on the MHA CCG meta website, and here we are. This is the Excel sheet, and I made a little tab at the bottom. You can see we have February, January, and then collective. Collective is just adding all of the data together, and the reason why I did this is because I want to show how the data is. So right now we're just going to look at data, and I do want to mention that this is not a fully accurate number sheet of how many Kirishimas have topped. There's actually been way more Kirishimas that topped. The reason why this number is skewed is because the event links here, some of them are counting for 2 or 3 different Kirishimas. But I've only put them in entry once because I'm not gonna copy paste the same link twice. I just don't like that. But already you can see that Kirishima is the character that tops the most. In the last 2 months that we've had our competitive or tournament spree for MHA, and realistically this number should be up to 12. 12 different Kirishimas topping in our events compared to everyone else. And next up, after Kirishima on who's the most played character, we have Jiro. We also have Ochako 2. Which is really crazy that Ochako 2. Is having more tops and caught up to Jiro. The reason why it's crazy is because the DLC just got released and already we're seeing the same amount of Ochako players, 2. Topping as much as the Jiro players. I think that's pretty crazy. And then after those characters, we got Eraserhead, which is what I think is one of the strongest defensive characters. We have Kamui Woods, also in the same tier as Eraserhead. Awesome. And then we have Todoroki. So shout outs to all you Todoroki players, because I've played the character and it is not easy to be that patient and also win with that character, because you're having to play the grindy matchup all the time. So after those characters, we then have Denki, Tokiyami, we have Shigaraki, surprise, and Tsuyasui, which is Froppy. And the reason why I'm saying surprise on Shigaraki is because earlier in the tier list, the thing I was saying about Shigaraki is that I feel like he doesn't have the right support right now, and in most times I'd rather just play Nomu, which is really funny because we don't have any top data for Nomu, which is actually kind of correct, I think. No, that's actually not correct, because we should have had the Omaha 1K, and I remember Nomu actually did top that event, and I don't know why it's not in here. I don't know if I should even add it. Actually, I don't think I should add it. I think I didn't add it on purpose, and the reason why I didn't add it is because we didn't have the plus ultra support, so it's entirely completely different meta. So I think that's why I forewent that deck list. It makes sense now. But yeah, even though I like Nomu better than Shigaraki, it just shows that Shigaraki's been doing better than Nomu, and you know, that's fine. You know, I still have my opinions, and it's okay to be wrong. But yeah, after that we have characters that just topped once, and that's All Might 2, All Might 3. We've got Sero, we've got, who else? Bakugo, Ochako 1 Dot, which is the tournament that Tamron won. And then we have Froppy 2 Dot, which is really cool. But yeah, all of this data is in the description below, and oh my gosh, we went 40 minutes. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope, you know, a lot of this data and information helps. Have a good one.